I talk on social media about things like Taylor Swift being a supply chain superhero. I'm talking about you as an end consumer. When you walk into Starbucks and you get that latte or whatever it is, there was like 500 steps that happened for that to happen. 500 people that were involved in this, and you never think about it. Amazon. 80% of the products that are bought and sold on Amazon come from China. And then here we're going and we're putting a, 150, 200 plus percent duty and tariff on it. It means economically that American consumers end up paying down this trade deficit. Businesses are going to do what they always do, which is try to safeguard their profitability. It's an industry of putting on your fireman's jacket every day and going and putting out those fires. If your business is reliant upon third parties, you don't own your own factories or otherwise in manufacturing, then you have got to create these sort of disruption proof mechanisms. And how you do that is.
So I guess we could just take it from the top. Kerim, could you share a little bit about why you got into supply chain? What about it was interesting to you back before it became front page news?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, my name's Kerim Kfuri. I'm the president CEO of the Atlas Network, global supply chain solutions company, offices in the States, offices overseas. And, to your question, I've always been fascinated with cultures. I've always been fascinated with international business. I think that I have a part of me that's very practical and logistical in nature. And so the supply chain really resonated with me. But that was after many years of being in the corporate world. I was in different kinds of jobs and positioning within the financial industry and so forth. And where it really kind of tipped the scale for me was I was working at the Securities and Exchange Commission in the Office of International Affairs. I then was at NASD FINRA, which is the regulator for the US markets, in their Sarbanes-Oxley and compliance groups. So I was working on a lot of risk mitigation and compliance and these kinds of ideas. And right around this time, I had gone on a trip to Asia. And when I went there, I was fascinated. My entrepreneurial side was fascinated how all these ideas could be made into reality, seeing widgets, coming off of factory lines, automation. I was just fascinated by this, but there was no real regulation and there was no real controls to protect people who wanted to operate in the global economy at this time. And this was, 20 plus years ago. And websites like Alibaba, of which now, I'm an ambassador of Alibaba, were creating a scenario of like a Pandora's box of fraud, not because they were not a good technology platform, but because of bad actors. There were bad players that were on the platform that were, positioning themselves as a manufacturer otherwise, but they weren't. They were trading companies or 3 or 4 steps removed. So when and if something went wrong, there was no recourse. They had no protections. They had, and customers had no levels of visibility. So it was in that time that I said, there's an opportunity here. There's a business here. And somehow my sort of corporate governance mind and my international business mind and my entrepreneurial mind came together to then create, which was the Atlas Network and the beginnings of the Atlas Network, which to today, remains a mass production global supply chain solutions company where we do consulting, we do A to Z supply chain creation and management. We have a network of almost 2,000 suppliers that we've built up and do this for thousands of customers and millions of products to have them take advantage of the global economy in a safe, methodical, best practices type of way. And so this is why I do what I do. And obviously there's no better time than today, than these days, post-pandemic and even into now, where it's become topical. So I'm kind of right in the middle of all this.
I love the name, Atlas, carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, as well as just global kind of supply chain homage there, reference. Now you mentioned the pandemic, and now we have talk of tariffs. How disruptive are tariffs to the global supply chain? And do you think that there is a logic or like, a reason that tariffs would be necessary these days?
Well, Tariffs were used historically as an economic sanction and even a source of revenue. And in the past, the United States used tariffs to basically be able to preclude other nations from bringing their products into the country because they didn't want to disrupt the manufacturing capabilities of the nation. And even to today, we see these kinds of restrictive or anti dumping type of duties, if you want to call it. I mean, if you were to try to take rice into Japan, it would be at a 700% duty rate because that's a market for them, and that exists throughout the world. In the United States, we have that in the furniture space, that if you want to bring in furniture from overseas or prefabricated furniture, it could have up to a 300% duty because it decimated sort of the furniture manufacturing in North Carolina and other places in the United States. So I understand it as a method to create a balance of trade in some ways. But the issue that we face is today, especially in the United States, is that we have become significantly dependent upon the global economy. And there's nothing wrong with that. And especially in industries that are more about consumer based products and things of that nature. Now, when you're talking about things like defense and areas where it's, there has to be certain levels of safeguards and protections, totally understand and agree that it should be a domestic type of control production mechanism. And but what's happening now is that our second largest company in the United States, Amazon, 80% of the products that are bought and sold on Amazon come from China. And then here we're going and we're putting a 150, 200 plus percent duty and tariff on it, and promoting this idea that it's with the concept of having our trade partners pay down a $1.2 trillion debt that exists in the United States, a trade debt. But the reality of it is that if those trading partners don't feel the leverage, or there's disproportionate leverage, of which there is, then you get this tit for tat type of game, which has been happening recently, where the United States raises tariffs a certain rate, and then our partners are raising it an equal rate. And it's a zero sum game, and there's no real flexibility in that. And why is that? It's because those largest trading partners are not our trading partners. They're the trading partners for the rest of the world, the manufacturing trading partners for the rest of the world. They have large economies of their own that they have to support and manage. And so it's not necessarily in their best interest to just kind of kowtow or bend in this way. So what does it really mean in the end of the day? It means that businesses are going to do what they always do, which is try to safeguard their profitability. So when it comes to excessive costs, they're going to try to reduce their cost infrastructure of the cost of goods, raise their prices, somehow try to absorb the tariff if they can't get it done from their trading partners, or worst case scenario, pass it off to the end customer, the end consumer. And what does that mean? It means economically that we, American consumers, end up paying down this trade deficit. It's essentially an additional tax that's being sort of presented in a way that is not exactly or entirely accurate. So that's really what's happening today, I think, more than anything else. Is it going to be disruptive? Yes, because people will buy less. It's not like salaries are going up proportionate to the level of the cost of our goods that we use every single day. So people will buy less, which will be, there'll be inflation, then there'll be recession, people buy less. And if it's significantly disruptive, businesses will go out of business that can't support the differential because their margins are too short, and they'll let go of people and so on and so forth. So there has to be a balance, equilibrium somehow that we come to, that is a mixture of both having some level of fairness in the global, I guess, trade landscape, but at the same time, too, not necessarily having economies getting fully disrupted, both domestic and international.
Thank you, by the way, Kerim, for explaining that, because that's the clearest I've heard. I've listened to podcasts about this and tried to understand exactly. From the UK, we're not as affected by it, but we obviously get a lot of that in the news. And that was very clear, and it makes a lot of sense as to what might happen and what the impact might be. I wonder, over 2 decades, I think, of growing your business and being involved in the global supply chain, tariffs, of course, are a big impact on global supply chains. I would assume the pandemic was. Wars. In your 20 years, what have been the biggest global events or political dynamics that have caused the biggest disruption, and what was the way that people can get around it?
Yeah, I mean, this is in the book that I wrote, Supply Chain Ups and Downs. I literally called it that because this is a roller coaster ride, right? Of the controllable factors and the uncontrollable factors, and how global trade and business has to react or manage these things. Let's talk about, for example, the war with Russia and Ukraine, right? And that is a perfect example of a war. So in a wartime situation, it cut off our ability to get certain oil and gas and so on. And by doing this, it ended up increasing the cost significantly in the shipping routes, which then flowed through to obviously businesses who have to pass off those costs and increase goods. The availability, some levels of energy, some level of oil and those type of based products were related to this. When you had something like, let's say, the big wildfires that took place up in Canada a couple of years ago. Well, that's a significant amount of lumber that then impacts the housing market that was, in the United States for building materials and things of that nature. As a matter of fact, speaking about Canada, this scenario currently with the tariffs and between the nations of Canada and the United States, they were talking about that could impact the prices of gas at the pump by up to 70 cents a gallon, which is significant because we know that 60 or 65% of, I think, our oil and gas resources come from Canada and Mexico. And so there's an infrastructure mechanism there. So, acts of God, right? Force majeure, Mother Nature, all of these things basically can flow through and can create dynamics that will impact the global economy and the ability to get goods from point A to point B, or the materials needed to produce these products. So there's a lot of impacts when we talk about the things that are outside of the control of just making sure that products are produced correctly with the right materials and in the right time frames. Then there's all this other stuff that then just can disrupt all that.
I wonder, in terms of to offset some of that risk, because like you said, especially things like acts of God, no one can see those things coming. So, but they have a huge impact on businesses all over the place. What are some things that businesses can do to mitigate some of that risk? Are we thinking like futures contracts to hedge the price of things that you might be importing? How would you say that businesses can mitigate some of that, at least?
I think that if your business is reliant upon third parties, so other factories, you don't own your own factories or otherwise in manufacturing, then you have got to create these sort of disruption proof mechanisms. And how you do that is by having alternative supply chains, not have all your eggs in one basket if possible. You look to create a mechanism of not just in time, but more just in case scenarios. And that is really where you are not overbuying, because inventory can kill companies. But if you have a past track record or history, if you want to say, in the space, you've been around for a decade or so, and buying behaviors and habits, generally speaking, don't necessarily purchase quarter to quarter. Maybe you want to look at, or month to month. Maybe you purchase quarter to quarter. Maybe you purchase, half a year, and you get economies of scale. You reduce down your costs, and now you have the ability to have more products at hand where you can scale your business faster and maybe accelerate sales cycles. So these are things that I think are very important to manage sort of the ebbs and flows that can happen within this space. And always be looking to be nimble and adaptable. This is not a industry where you just rest on your laurels whatsoever. It's that 101st time that you do the production that you say, we've done it 100 times already, everything's going to be fine. It's that time where you just kick your feet up and say everything's going to be okay, where the train goes off the tracks, whether it's the things that you thought of or the things that you never could have seen coming. So it is absolutely an industry about forward-looking, forecasting, risk assessments, risk tolerances, which could be materials-based, output-based, resources-based, technology-based, costs-based, and any of the drivers of those factors. So there is a risk mapping that should be done for the company, industry to industry, and product to product to really determine where the areas of risk fall and how to therefore be somehow disruption proof against these things. And some of them, as we mentioned before, could be backup plans, it could be forward planning and buying. There's a lot of areas to tackle. But again, it's such a wide space with so many different ins and outs that it's difficult to sort of have like a one size fits all approach.
Sounds incredibly complex and almost like fun at the same time. Like I imagine as you get good at it, it's like doing a super advanced crossword puzzle. What you said earlier, Kareem, about um, implementing tariffs without leverage is kind of like a hollow move. It reminded me a little bit of something I heard during the pandemic with government subsidies, and that some businesses got an unearned extension of life that otherwise, they would have been culled from the herd. And I was wondering if you thought there was a similarity with tariffs. Like, do you think that they help? Do you think that they hurt more than they help, or do you think that that's like case by case?
I think it's case by case. I think it's these days, I don't think it is being used in the ways that it's being said, meaning that it is a way to bring down our debt and that's the main intention. I do think it's a negotiation tactic more than anything else. And that's okay as well, as long as the indicators are being followed very carefully. Because when the CPI report, right, the Consumer Production Index report, or the PPI report, the Producers Production Index, start to spike and start to show that we're having significant impacts, and then you see, and that's indicators of inflation and therefore recession, as we talked about before, then you know you're going too far. And now it's working against the original intention. So do I believe what's currently being done in the United States is a good idea with limits? Yes. With limits. I don't think it's a problem to try to balance, global trade and to, claim your stake and say, hey, I want some levels of balancing here, regardless of your political thoughts and feelings on it. And you have to have a global citizenship mentality, but also look out for the interests of your own nation as well. So these things make sense to me in many ways, but not at the detriment of your own population. And that's when, if you go too far with it, that's what's going to happen. That will happen. So that's where I think it's really kind of muddy waters.
Yeah, the word that comes to my mind is balance, and it seems to be an elusive word for us people.
And now, and sorry, one more point on that. And now what I see happening is it's more a race to who's going to save face, which if we're talking
Save
about
face with your own people, or save face
no,
to
no, no,
whom?
no, no. Internationally, in the global landscape, like no one's willing to bend because everyone wants to save face. Everyone wants to feel like
Right.
they're right, you
Right.
won, you lost, whatever else it is, for whatever purposes,
Right.
political or in the news or however you want to call it. And
Yeah.
so the rest of us get to watch this show unfold while this sort of unknown outcome continues to
Mm.
kind of permeate and develop and morph. So
Yeah.
I hope that cooler heads prevail,
Mm.
and there ends up being a scenario of balance, as you said, and it's a level of coming to some levels of equilibrium where we can.
I think those cooler heads might be artificial. It's like a race against AI.
Maybe.
Speaking of which, kind of leverage in artificial intelligence, semiconductors seem to be an industry that, like, TSMC has leverage in, because as I understand, which is rudimentary at best, no one can do what they do. And that seems really interesting. Like, I didn't realize that was possible, that these days when you have global supply chain and internet, that there's some things that no one else can imitate. Are there any
Well,
other industries? Oh, sorry,
I
go
was
ahead.
going to say no one else can imitate yet.
Okay.
We all know that it's just a matter of runway time, technology, capabilities, espionage. whatever. The point is that, is there any other industries that are fully disruptive that no one else is pulling ahead of the pack type of thing? Is that what you mean?
Let me just take a half step back. It seemed that the runway was so significant that it's better to continue with the existing supplier rather than try to catch up. And I was wondering, to your question there, yes, are there any other industries that have such a severe moat around them, similar to the semiconductor industry in the global supply chain space?
Yes, I mean, definitely, for sure. I think when it comes to some levels of agricultural products, that's for sure. That's why we have a big reliance on like Mexico and some of the other trading partners. I think that when it comes to some natural resources, like we talked about before, like wood and so forth, I think some materials like steel. I think, we don't make steel here anymore. So basically, that's a scenario where it's very, concentrated in a particular area, and to sort of all of a sudden create new steel factories or mills is going to be complex. I'm actually going to Cleveland, as I mentioned, for a conference, and I'm going to be seeing Cleveland Cliffs, which is one of the few remaining steel sort of innovation and manufacturing plants in the United States. I'm very excited to see that, and so on. But I would assume, just like many other industries, that what's being done is just kind of like drops in a bucket. It's not enough to service the consumer needs or the output required of this nation. And that's why we look to other places. It's not just a matter of cost differentials or so forth. It's a matter of actual capabilities. And so I do believe there are many industries that touch what you're talking about.
It's interesting. This reminds me, I was recently in Lisbon, actually during the blackout period that they had there, which was fun. But we went on a walking tour, and they were telling us about the history of Portugal. And at one point in time, or at many points in time, Portugal and Spain were not best friends. And Spain blocked all trade that came through Asia and Europe, which put Portugal in a space of going, okay, we can't get the stuff we need from the east. All that's left is the ocean. Let's go there. Right. And then that started, I'm sure, amongst lots of other things at the time, started far exploration by sea that hadn't been done yet. And it's just interesting as we're talking about things where, depending on which country you're in or what you have access to, sometimes you need something that you cannot get elsewhere. Or sorry, you cannot get where you are, and so you have to look elsewhere. I wonder if trade with China in the States becomes something that is so expensive that it happens less, where else can the States go? What's the equivalent of the Atlantic Ocean to them in that analogy?
Well, it's not there yet, but I would say that real opportunities, I think, are developing and will exist in Africa. I also think that South America is a great opportunity. Natural resources are there. There's budding technology. There's workforce. There's some differentials in sort of economics around labor. I think that there are real opportunities in those parts of the world, but I don't think that they're ready now. I think we're probably a good, 5 to 10 years from that point. And the most important part is who is spearheading that? Well, I believe Asia is spearheading that. I believe that it's Asia and Chinese factories that are in Africa, that are in South America, that are taking their capabilities and their know-how and so forth, and putting their footprint onto these other regions to take advantage of those locales, those materials, those labor capabilities, and so forth. So I do think that those will be big markets, but it won't be like some non-entangled scenario with global superpowers that are currently already doing this.
Do you think that
That, that was sorry, and to that point, I mean that was part of the whole conversation around nearshoring
I was
when a
just
lot
gonna
of the
go there?
discussions were being when a lot of the discussions were being had about Canada and Mexico as being nearshoring partners and so on and so forth. Well, what many people didn't understand is that was because so many Chinese factories were going into these places and developing those facilities to basically take advantage of the idea of, hey, you want closer? Well, we can be closer. Let's just set up here and set up there. And I am all about the most efficient outcome. The most efficient outcome creates the best economic prosperity for the world. And if that is that, then that's what that is. I've always been geographically agnostic. And I think that that's in many ways, when we're talking about just purely economics, you have to look at it in that way.
This might be sensitive, but when you look at nearshoring and replacing a behemoth like Chinese manufacturing, do you think that that ship has sailed, or do you think there are ways in which the U.S. could once again, or North America could once again, be known for manufacturing?
I don't think the United States is going to be known for manufacturing at the scale that our consumers need it. I think that there could be particular industries that we grow into or bring back, if you want to say, to the US. It definitely should be any sensitive industries that are for national security and so forth, if they aren't already here. And I do think what's going to level the playing field is going to be AI and automation, because we currently have a 500,000 manufacturing jobs in the United States that nobody wants. And so there's no way that we're going to scale that up and then go from a 500,000 jobs that nobody wants to millions and millions of jobs that nobody wants. The difference is going to be AI. The difference is going to be automation. It's going to be the labor force that is not really a labor force. And instead, having more strategy around manufacturing and logistics and fulfillment and technology, rather than simply brute force and turning wrenches and the rest of it. And if we can master that in particular industries, I think that that's where North American manufacturing will start to have a nice trajectory.
Yeah, I was curious about that with robotics, advanced humanoid robotics, and what that might mean. uh, Elon Musk had this pretty bold prediction, as he sometimes does, that the Tesla Optimus robots are going to be pumped out at 10,000 this year, and then a 5x year over year, which would mean millions by the end of the decade, if it's remained that same level of output. And there's over a dozen advanced humanoid robotics companies out there. So I started to imagine, like, what might that look like from a production standpoint if you have these robots that don't need sleep, that the margins get thicker as like almost like a SaaS model. It's expensive at the beginning, but then they become cheaper and cheaper, perhaps over decades.
Just like our phones and our computers and everything else that were thousands of dollars, now they're hundreds of dollars, or sometimes even for free when you buy a plan. So, like, I mean, you're 100% right. I think also what's at play here are the businesses that don't want to take the chances of disruption, which is what you said before, Becky. Perfect example is Amazon. Amazon has these port workers that are striking and so on and so forth, and now disrupting the ability to deliver these products to consumers. Well, isn't it a lot easier for them to say, hey, you know what, we're just going to flip the robots on and not have to deal with that, and not disrupt our market share and our stock price, and have to come to the table with the unions and all this kind of thing. Now, let me position it in the right way. That's not to say that the grievances of these workers were not correct. That's not to say that they didn't really have the reasonings as to why they wanted fair labor and wages and time and the rest of it. I'm not saying against that or discounting that. But from a business standpoint, that comes down to being a moral, ethical decision. And these businesses will make those decisions. And unfortunately, when it comes to business, a lot of businesses will choose profitability over those types of things. And so that's going to be, or disruptions, to avoid those kinds of disruptions. So that's where I think that's going to really make a play for the automation and what we're talking about here.
I was talking to Becky earlier about how 12,000 years isn't enough to fully evolve from our hunter-gatherer roots. And I think that a lot of us want to continue to pick berries from the same tree that we found, or the same bush that we found. And I think things are constantly moving. There's this fluidity to nature. And it's unclear necessarily what leverage you have until certain kind of hands are dealt. And so, yeah, I understand your meaning there, Kerim. There's empathy for sure that's required, but then also reality that the business model might have provided berries for a period, but then those berries need to be picked elsewhere, perhaps. And so these are kind of considerations for both parties, I think.
Yeah, we're a convenience culture. Everybody wants to be able to just push buttons and push the same buttons, to your point of the picking the berries.
I want someone to push buttons for me. I'm tired of pushing buttons. I want to just lay back and
See, that's exactly what I'm talking about, and that works against industries that are consistently changing and are morphing, and there's no real way to completely level that playing field, even with AI and otherwise. Even if you ran regression risk models that come back and say there's a 2% chance that there's going to be a hurricane, because when you look at the data for the past 50 years, a hurricane happens every blah, 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 blah. So this trade route should be fine. And, you run some kind of regression models and algorithms to see if it's safe to go from point A to point B. All of a sudden, Mother Nature has a different plan. Or, and so, or a war breaks out or something that was completely unexpected. And the models don't talk about that, or maybe they do, but past history doesn't dictate potentially future events. That's all we have to go on with a lot of these technological models. We're looking at history to predict the future. Well, there's many things in our history that are irrelevant today. There was a time where we did horse and buggy. We're going to try to put horse and buggy into the equation with cars and airplanes and boats now? Probably not. So it's all how far back you go and what's your point of reference and how much we've evolved and changed. So your data sets are really, really important. And some technologies are changing every week, let alone every day. So how do you have a past track record that can project the future when what you are looking at historically may be irrelevant in the future?
right. And we don't know what that is going to be. Um, I was amazed at how complex an airplane is, like Airbus or Boeing, and how many countries, I think it's like 150 plus countries, went into supplying the elements and like manufacturing, building an airplane. What are some of the most complex, most global products that you're aware of?
I mean, I think it still comes down to tech, computers for sure, even phones. No, because no matter how automated it is, there's still a barrage of testing that has to be facilitated to then produce, this thing, right? Doesn't overheat, it processes properly, it does all the different functionality, there are updates, there's software, there's so on. And then generally the life expectancy is, 2 years, maybe 3 years until a new model. Because if they built phones that were meant to last 10 years, then in the end of the day, no one would ever buy one again. And so, I think tech is definitely an area for that. I think another area for that, honestly, is fashion. I know that may sound a little bit interesting, but trends change, and that is consistently shifting, and that could be with regards to different materials, with regards to different manufacturing techniques, how it's done, where it's done. I think about things like sneakers, where sneakers were, where sneakers are today, or even just these different areas that could be complex simply because there needs to be enough variability to keep up with trends, and the trends shift much faster than the supply chain can change. So in this way, you're always like trying to catch up. And that's where fast fashion and fast manufacturing, I think, bridge that gap a degree where you can do that. Yeah, I mean, those are just some quick ones that come to mind.
I wonder, so navigating any business or any series of businesses for 20 years comes with its challenges, comes with its leadership challenges, probably especially in a space where you're not at the mercy of, but you can be at the mercy of wars and pandemics and Mother Nature, as we were talking about. What are some of the lessons you've learned as a leader navigating something that is so unpredictable potentially?
It's very, 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 it's a very simple answer to a very complicated question. And the simple answer is communication. That is it. Because through communication, expectations can be set. And from there, you can then be able to navigate through these challenges. And that could be internally, it could be with your suppliers, it could be with your customers, it could be at any aspect in the entire supply chain. If you have good communication, you can bridge these divides and these challenges that are going to consistently arise because you're willing to talk, not get caught sort of, in a difficult situation. And even if you are in a difficult situation, acknowledge it, admit there's been a difficult situation, and then try to determine what's your next course of action to resolve it. So when it comes to tariffs, clients of ours call us, what are we doing? What are we doing? And the answer is, we don't know. But the truth of it is that there's probably 5 things that could be done. Let's talk about them. And then you as long as you've presented the realistic expectation of what is happening and as much information knowledge that you have, everybody's sort of in the same boat of trying to, figure it out. But at the same time, people are also in the boat of trying to point fingers. They want to point blame. Somebody has a boss who wants to, put the pressure on this person. So they want answers from somewhere else and they want to try to push the blame along. And that's why, we never represent ourselves in my world as the manufacturer. We are not a manufacturer. We are a representative group on behalf of customers who want to take advantage of the global economy and global supply chain, global manufacturing. What does that mean? There's only certain things we can take responsibility for, and there's only certain things that we can't. And as long as that's clearly understood and laid out to everybody from day one, then you really have done the task at hand. You've given visibility, you've given transparency, you've given aspects that they may not have had otherwise and help them to navigate the economies, but you are not creating the economies. You're not responsible for the economies that are at work. And you need to have a balancing act there too. So
Again, it's something, like you said, it sounds simple. And it's something, for me, I see this all the time. So my background is in sales and sales training, sales coaching. Despite the fact that sales is a job of communication, it often comes with a lack of communication, right?
Oh,
Lack of
absolutely.
proper expectation setting and things like that.
Absolutely.
And it's such a small, seemingly easy thing that many people really, really struggle with. When it comes to kind of the leadership side of things and the communication all throughout, is it something that you encourage everybody at every stage of your business to be extremely transparent in their communication? Is
Yep.
it something that you try and model? Is it a value in the company?
It's
How
all of it.
important is it? Right.
It's essential. It's absolutely essential. And it's something that I model, and I expect everyone in the teams to have this same kind of understanding and to know that no matter what the challenges or the issue is, we talk about it. I don't care what it is, because the moment that we don't is when the small thing becomes a really big thing. So let's just talk about it right then and there. When issues arise, issues are always going to arise, and we come up with solutions to these problems. Because this is not an industry of not having problems. It's an industry of navigating them. It's an industry of putting on your fireman's jacket every day and going and putting out those fires, whatever they may be. It's a problem solving industry. And without the problems, there's no solving. So it is absolutely, hand in glove as far as that's concerned.
It's what David said at the start. It sounds like good fun. Keeps you busy, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. It's
Can you share an example of how applying risk-based strategies helped a client successfully avoid a major supply chain disruption?
That's like every day. That's literally every single day. Let me try to think about it for you for a minute. Let's talk about tariffs. We have one client of ours that essentially has, a long-standing relationship with a large-scale distribution group. And the distribution group had said recently, hey, those 40 containers that you have at the port that you're supposed to ship to us? Don't ship them. We want you to just put them in storage and hang on to them until we tell you otherwise. Well, there's a problem with that. The problem is that the supplier is going to hang on to these, containers for infinitum. And the terms that they have is that they don't get paid until they are 30 days from the bill of lading, from when you ship it out. And so it's a real challenge, because now they're talking about months and months that they may be sitting without any kind of capital coming in. At the same time, you have to look at the flip side of it and say, well, what's the risk to the customer? Don't just see your own risks. What's the risk to the customer who's buying this? And the risk to them is that they're going to go 3 to 4 months without any product. So they may lose market share in the industry. They may lose their customers, and they're operating in a year with only 3 quarters instead of 4 quarters of business, right? So that's a real complicated thing. So now you got to bridge the divide between these two and basically create a scenario of reducing risks, but at the same time giving a mutual benefit to both sides, something that works. So what do? You say, all right, customer, we're going to ship the goods, okay? Because we made them for you, and basically we're not in the business of babysitting your products. What we are going to do, though, is because we're longstanding partners and to help you with regards to this tariff situation we have is that we're going to extend the payment terms. So instead of net 30, it's going to be like net 120. We'll give you the 3 to 4 months that you would have had where we would have been holding it without any cost against it. So you take in the goods, you pay the tariffs, right? And you start selling the product. You don't lose your customer, you don't lose your market share, and you basically are selling without any costs against that revenue you generate. And then at the end of 3 to 4 months or whatever else it is, then you pay us. In this way, you have a 4-corner solution, which benefits, it doesn't benefit the supplier who basically didn't get their capital like they should in the time they would. But what was their alternative? To just hang on to the goods for 3 to 4 months and then afterwards then ship it, wait another month for the goods to get there. And so it's just better for them to just ship it. Everybody's in business. Everyone's navigating sort of a transitional period. And then you just kind of work through it in a way. And that was a recent, solve.
Yeah. I like that, kind of grow the pie, figure out a strategy that it's more win-win. How do you see current trends in technology like AI or blockchain reshaping the future of supply chains for businesses?
Well, absolutely. On the AI side, I see some significant advancements. Again, I told you early that I'm an ambassador with Alibaba, and they just released the world's first AI sourcing tool, which is called Axio, ACCIO. Pretty amazing stuff, where you can go into this platform and you can show a picture or put in a very brief description. It will find the top rated suppliers to manufacture exactly what you need. You don't have to search for it anymore. Very clear. And then if you've never made that product before, or if you want some additional like business research or background on it, they have a tool which is in there called Business Research Tool, where you put in the parameters. You say, I have $30,000. I'm trying to create a t-shirt company, and this is my restrictions, and this is what I'm looking to do, and so on and so forth. And it will produce an entire business plan for you in the matter of pushing a button, with all the like risks and areas and challenges and opportunities and so forth that you can then analyze, digest, and work through. So this is a way that Alibaba is producing some significant AI tech to really create the ability for customers to source more effectively and efficiently, and therefore be able to produce more economics for themselves and for the global economy. So I find that to be fascinating. They're reducing down the costs and the time involved to do those activities, and therefore kind of shortening the learning curve and so forth. So I think that's good. The other one I think that's a very big and important area is with regards to the ideation process, where you can use these tools like Midjourney or some of these other Adobe Suite tools to basically create renderings at the snap of your fingers. Instead of spending 4 or 5 months working with designers to create drawings and different mock-ups and renderings, you can have these in a matter of seconds and then transition those over to factories who can then 3D model it or produce it very quickly. And now you've cut down your development life cycle in global supply chain, especially in the ideation prototyping stage, by months and months and months. That could have taken maybe 3, 6 months. You could do that in 1 month or in 2 months, very, very quickly, which then allows you to get to manufacturing, allows you to get to putting products in the market and basically moving things ahead. So I think that's definitely an area. And then outside of that, definitely in shipping and logistics, looking at things like green corridors and the most efficient transit routes and which ones have the least carbon footprint, and measuring those kinds of things and being able to then determine which areas are ripe for disruption or for additional enhancement or capabilities. So there's a lot that's happening with regards to just on the manufacturing side, obviously on the logistical side. I think on the customs clearance side and brokerage side of it, as far as on blockchain, where you have these disseminated ledgers where you can be able to track all this information and be able to easily refer back or get certain ideas around what certain industries look like, or how the importation is from nation to nation, industry to industry, product to product, which gives a lot of good data around what's coming across the borders. And then you can backtrack that into availability of product and material usage, and and so more data points, more tech, all of it can come together in a more seamless way. And then on warehousing and fulfillment as well, that's another big area too.
What I love about the way you answer questions, Kareem, it's like you have a warehouse of knowledge and you're going, I'm just going to give you these things off the shelf, but there's still so much underneath that you can tell that
Whatever tickles my fancy, right? It just
yeah,
kind of like,
that list could go on and on and on and on, which is
yeah,
fascinating, the
it
things that are coming.
could make for some good dinner conversation.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
You're also a fellow podcast host, co-hosting the Supply and Demand Show. What's the most surprising insight you've uncovered through your conversations there?
The most important insight is how reliant we all are on the global supply chain, regardless of industry. Doesn't matter what we're talking about. I can tell you the last three guests, for example, were a gentleman who runs and operates the White Desert Project up in Antarctica. So basically talks about the difficulties of getting supplies and managing that in a Arctic tundra. We had Damon John on the show from Shark Tank. We're in partnership together, so we do a lot of work together. And he came on and he talked about the growth of businesses and starting from manufacturing early on with very little resources, and then now into working with so many different companies and licensing and the ins and outs of different aspects of manufacturing. And then we had a ambassador of Drew Estates Cigars from Nicaragua who was on there that talked about agricultural supply chain and everything from farmers to production to manufacturing, distribution, and then basically end consumers, and how you work through this process. And that regardless of how automated in the world we are, when it comes to premium cigars, it's a handmade process. And that's interesting too, because that poses different logistical bottlenecks and supply chains. Only 10 fingers and how many humans can do these things, but the demand's up here. So how do you bridge that gap? And what do you do? And back to your point about supply chain, if Mother Nature decides to be nasty one year, then the seeds and the crops have a problem, and then you don't have any cigars. So this is the scenario where it can impact global supply chain from something like that. So those are like the last three guests, but regardless, supply chain and logistics ties it all together. It doesn't matter what the industry is or what you're really doing. It's interconnected in so many ways. It's just a matter of knowing how it is or why it is. I mean, I talk on social media about things like Taylor Swift being a supply chain superhero, or Mr. Beast, or why it's important that your bananas are green in the supermarket. That's a supply chain, and just different kind of elements that no matter how you sort of look to uncover it, or even your cup of coffee, right? What it takes to have a cup of coffee, the farming and the roasting and the transportation and the grinding, and then the cup itself, and just think about all that. But we drink this coffee, we have a cup of coffee in the day, and it's like there were like 500 people that were involved in this.
Yeah, it blew my mind. I spoke to a gentleman in consumer packaged goods, and he was talking about like sourcing coffee beans and stuff, and it just blew my mind.
And that's just the bean. I'm talking about you as an end consumer. When you walk into Starbucks and you get that latte or whatever it is, there was like 500 steps that happened for that to happen to you that day. And you never think about it, right?
I saw something recently. It was a guy that was figuring out and went and did this, how long it would take a single human and how much money it would cost to make a ham and cheese sandwich from scratch. So everything from scratch. And it took him like 9 months and 15 grand or something like that to have a sandwich, which is, like you said, Karim, we just don't think about it.
I'm going to start charging more for my ham and cheese sandwiches.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, well, think about it. I mean, someone's going to have to, basically what they're going to have to do is they're going to, for the ham part, they're going to have to raise a pig. and they're gonna have to then, grow it and feed it and everything else. Then they're gonna have to slaughter it, and then they're gonna then have to take it and they're gonna smoke it or do whatever you have to do. Same thing goes with the cheese side of it, where you have to raise a cow and turn it into milk, and the milk turns into cheese and process, and then the bread. And if you're gonna do the bread, are you really gonna, have a little mill and take the wheat and turn it into bread and flour and so on. And yeah, I mean, yeah, think about all the steps.
Making the oven.
Making an oven.
Yeah. I'm not sure if he went that far, but yeah, it would take a lot.
It's not easy stuff. I mean, go back to colonial days basically and think about how they did it and what they would do, and that's pretty much what you would have to do.
High level, how is Taylor Swift a supply chain hero?
High level. Well, basically, her magic is consistency. Show to show, country to country, the consistency of her show and experience. She doesn't go to Australia and then all of a sudden sound terrible. She doesn't go to, wherever and sound, more amazing than somewhere else. How does she do that? The whole show travels. Planes, boats, whatever else it is, all the equipment, all the staff, all the people, all the costumes. It is the same mechanism every single place that she goes to. And that is absolutely logistics and supply chain to basically work towards consistency by not changing those variables. I'll give you another example of this. I went to Barcelona and I went to Football Club Barcelona and went to their big facility there. And what was very, very interesting to me, the most interesting thing to me is they took us into the area where all the players would eat lunch. And the players, when they eat lunch, they sit next to the same exact player every day. They eat the same thing, not the same thing every day, but the same menu basically every week. They watch the same things on TV when they're doing what they're doing. And when they go to play a match somewhere else, exact same configurations. Same kind of room, TV here. This guy sits next to this guy. This guy eats those things. They basically have determined that they don't want to create any kind of disruptions in their players, that all of a sudden he gets a stomach ache because he ate something that he wasn't used to, or he got really disturbed because he saw something on the news that wasn't blah, 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 blah. And so, I mean, it's almost like brainwashing in many ways, but the point being is it's all about consistency. They want to not have anything impact the consistency of their players in as little variables as possible. So they try to control those. So if they put the one guy next to the other guy that they don't like each other, then all of a sudden everybody's angry on the field and they do dumb things, right? I mean, just things like that, interesting.
Very interesting. How each tiny variable adds up to a bigger impact at the end.
Could. And in their world, they're saying, hey, we've invested millions and millions and millions of dollars in these players. We don't want to take those risks. Well, if everybody's got to sit next to each other, okay. If everybody's got to, eat something similar and keep on a strict diet and sort of not have too many external influences when they're in the game mode. I mean, nothing can change when they leave there and if they get into an issue with their family or anything else. But when they're there, and they're not going to make that disrupted.
Where can people follow you? Where would you like to point them to keep up with your work and supply chains in general?
Sure. So for any of my thought leadership or consulting, public speaking type stuff, that would be KerimKfuri.com, just my first name, last name. For any global supply chain solutions assistance, whether it's in the consulting side or the development or engineering of supply chains, that's theatlasnetwork.com. And other than that, the book is supplychainupsanddowns.com for anybody who's interested in that. It's a real easy read and gives you a good, clear sense of the supply chain space. Outside of that, it's the Instagram, X, Facebook, LinkedIn type of social media stuff. But those are the big ones. My personal one, the company one, and then for the book, that would pretty much be good places.
Thank you for talking to us today. It was enlightening.
Thank you, Kerim.
Thank you, guys. Great questions, by the way. I really appreciated it. And I hope we all had a good discussion here. I did. So I hope it went over well for you too.